have the weight of the world on my shoulder. I was like, and I literally cannot stand on my right foot. Literally, that's where I tore the tendons. And she laughed and she said, God's told you twice, but if you haven't hurt them yet, you still got an arm and a leg left. And I literally dropped into my bedroom floor. I'll never forget that moment. And I just wept. And I was like, okay. I was like, I give up. So there had been a lot of prayer. I had been given advice, always pray for peace or no peace. And so I had spent 3.5 years praying for peace about the marriage, about my career, about all the things, because I got young children.
Yeah.
Thomas and Lainey were going to finish high school before I started this company. And then in the blink of an eye, I get this moment of peace and clarity, and it's time. And I actually woke up to a booming voice that said, how do you know whether or not you can fly if you're not willing to wear the wings? And I remember waking up and going,
This is the Turn Your Life Around podcast, and I'm the 180 Lady. I've been helping people turn their lives around since 2007 as the founder and CEO of a large mental health company. The purpose of this podcast is to have meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends, everyday people just like you and me, about how they turn their lives around. We'll discuss all things mental health, fitness, finances, relationships, parenting, spirituality, you name it. My hope is that you can take something away that will encourage you today. I'm your host, Sarah Coates. Are you ready to turn your life around? Hello, welcome to the podcast. We are having meaningful conversations with old friends and new friends. And my guest today is a longtime friend. I've known her, we were just chatting about a little over a decade when our businesses were next door to each other. We'll chat more about that. But I want to introduce Melissa Godwin Overton to the podcast. She's an award-winning, regionally recognized, and internationally certified educator, mentor, speaker, entrepreneur. She is 1 part nurse, 2 parts thriving entrepreneur, 5 parts high energy speaker, 3 parts networking and connection maven, 2 parts loving mama, 1 part hip hop lover. Wow, so many parts there, Melissa.
yeah.
Not surprising, Melissa commands over 25 years of experience in highly regulated, high-stress, community-based, and diverse environments, including 14 years of ER nursing, critical care, and nurse leader expertise. She is the founder and CEO of medicaltraining.me, which was launched in 2013. And nowadays, one of my favorite things about her is her speaking. She is really recognized as a regional and national speaker. And so welcome to the podcast, Melissa. So excited to have you.
Thank you. So glad to be here. It's fun to look at the journey that we've both been on this whole time. It's been very exciting.
Yeah, I know. I think we were just comparing notes a minute ago and realized it's been over a decade that we've known each other. I met you in Smithfield, North Carolina.
And I think you were just starting as well. And so we were both excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and had no idea what we were fully getting into, right? And how it's evolved.
We had opened a location, I think that was our second location we opened for my mental health company, 180 Counseling. And we opened that location in Smithfield, and happy to be next door to you, and really great area to be in. But sometimes in business, certain ventures don't really work out, or they don't, maybe they're not sustainable. Maybe you and I can talk a little bit about that a little bit more later on this podcast, because I know in business and entrepreneurship, sometimes you have to pivot. So we had a Smithfield office for a number of years, and then changed up some insurance contracts and ended up closing that site. And it's just, I think, one of those experiences in business that sometimes you just have to pivot.
Absolutely. And if you don't, you become irrelevant. So it's just part of the journey and part of the process. And part of being an entrepreneur is being comfortable with figuring it out as you go. You know, I tell people you're building the plane while you're flying it. So it's an invisible jet. So I tell people unless you have the clicker to go beep, if something happens to Sarah, does anybody know where the jet is, much less how to fly it?
That is true. You're building it as you go. I think that's what people who aren't in business may not understand that. But those in the audience listening that run businesses or that are starting out in business, you literally do. There's not a textbook per se to follow exactly how to do your thing.
Not at all. I tell people when you have a franchise, it's different because they do get that SOP, the standard operating procedures. But for me, my SOP was not built until my company was 8 years old. And I had a consultant that came in and I said, look, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, no one knows what to do with this company.
Right.
They don't know the thoughts that are going through my head. And I was hiring someone on a more full-time capacity to help take over operations. And it was like, how do I put into words the information to get that across, right?
Yeah.
And so it was very much a journey. And I think we have to remember also that we can't be everything for everybody and we can't know all the answers to everything. So sometimes you have to trust to send that information out and let someone else with their expertise come in. And
For sure.
that was worth its weight in gold for me. And a lot of lessons learned in that was work with the team. So.
Yeah. And I think too, like just running my business now for 17 years, you have to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you in different
Absolutely.
areas.
Yes.
Good grief. There are so many things I do not do well and am not smart at. Math is one of them.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
There's all these different aspects to business, no matter what area of business you're in. And I think the key is surrounding yourself with people who are talented in certain areas that you are not and smarter than you in certain areas. And it's okay to say, I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to hire that person to do it.
Absolutely. I always tell people the smartest people in the room are the ones that surround themselves with smarter people. I say that all the time. And it's so true. And it's amazing sometimes, like if you're a person of faith, like how the most random relationships start and you like us meeting, like so random. We met each other in the parking lot. I can remember the first time I met you and I was like, who is this chick?
Yeah.
And us talking. And we have known that over a decade later, how we would collaborate on different things and how we would connect different people to different projects. But it's one of these God moments. I remember there was a movie in the 90s called Entrapment with Catherine Zeta-Jones. And she was like this master thief. And they were trying to break in this one place and it was all lasers, right?
Yeah.
And you remember she grabbed,
Yeah.
So she grabbed the powder and she went, and when she did that, like all of a sudden, and when I started my business, I had this moment where I was like so afraid because you really have to step out on faith and you have to just really, you're never 100% ready.
Yep.
And so those people that are looking at getting into your own thing and doing your own thing, you have to understand it's never going to be 100% ready. And the conversations I had, I'm going to do this when, and I tell people, God laughed. It was like, no, you're going to do it now. And I'm like, really? Are we sure? But then there was this moment where I felt like I blew the dust and all of a sudden, all these random relationships I had and connections, like all of a sudden they made sense. I understood why this person was connected me to this way. And I tell people probably the most fun part of my career is being the Oprah of connections. I feel like Oprah, every time I can go, oh, I can connect you to that person. And I'm like, you get a connection. Nobody's getting a car, right? But you go get a connection. And sometimes it may be a life altering event for someone, or it may be just an event that blesses someone else in a way that I want us to all pay it forward and do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are a super connector. I know I've emailed you multiple times over the years, like, hey, do you know anybody who does this? Or hey, whatever.
Well, and you've done the same, in all honesty. And for me, that's the fun of it. That's where I get my pure joy, because I think about how hard you have to work to get your foot in the door and build these relationships. And it really is about building relationships. Yeah. People go, I just want to be successful and I want to have a company. And Henry Ford said, why do I have to have the whole person when all I really wanted was their hands? And that just makes me laugh. But you have to build a relationship with the person and understand that a lot of things in life also are about farming moments, not fishing moments. So you can't just walk in one day and make one touch and expect that to be everything and take off, because although we've known each other over a decade, the way we've known each other has grown and evolved over the years in many different ways.
Yeah, that's good wisdom. Yeah. Relationships and connections. I just think that's everything. What's that saying? It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Oh, yeah.
I literally live that out month to month. It just is so true.
Same here. Same here. And sometimes it takes years to build those inroads. I can think of one person I really wanted to get to know and get to network, and it took 5 or 6 years to get that person to give me the time of day. And the reason that I kept going for it was because I knew they knew things I wanted to know. And I just had to give it time, because what I also knew is because they were such a connector themselves and they carried so much influence, everybody was trying to get a piece of them. And most people wanted to get a piece and walk away, where I thought, I want to get to know this person because I want to find ways to add value back to them as well.
Right.
And so it took a while.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's really awesome.
And a non-stalkerish, creepy here.
Yeah,
and I like,
yeah.
hey.
So, how did you get into medical training? medicaltraining.me. How did you launch into all this?
So I was an ER nurse that kept showing up in my manager's office every month going, be really cool is if somebody, and usually it was because something had happened. It would have been nice to know that ahead of time. Saving lives, just a little thing. And so she came to me after about 5 years and she said, "Hey, you've shown up in my office every week with a new idea." And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "We've decided to create a nurse educator position in this department. We've decided you're the mouthiest, most opinionated nurse with a bachelor's degree." And I was like, wow.
Thanks.
So yeah, thanks. And I was like, that sounds like a great idea, except I work night shift because I'm mischievous. And so if I go to day shift, hospital administration's going to learn my name. And she threw her head back and she goes, "Oh, honey, they all know who you are." And I was like, yeah, they're asking to hire me. So that's literally how my education journey started. And she actually pushed me out of the nest. So about a year into doing that job, she said, every now and then a leader gets a chance to see someone's next step in their journey. You have to leave this department, go do this. And I took it as a, have I disappointed you?
Right.
Why are you pushing me out? And she said, "Do you love us?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Then go advocate for us at a different level."
Oh, wow.
So I walked into this new role that, again, my success always seems to be around the fact that somebody has an idea, but not a plan. And they just let me go do it. I'm like the little toy car you pull back and you just go, let her go. So I walked into this new role and that's where I had a leader that wasn't a nurse. And she says, "I can teach you how to do what you do better." And I was like, "Yes, please." So she pulled me in and I was voluntold to be an instructor of this. So that evolved into quite a passion where I actually was very nervous about that. I was worried I would fail and that I would disappoint myself and others, that the imposter syndrome gets really loud, right, in these transition moments. And she pushed me out of the nest there and said, "These are things you're going to do." And I did it. As I fell in love with that, I recognized I probably would not always be in the hospital itself. And so I said, one day when I'm in my 50s, I'm going to start a business. Right. And it's going to be to train other people and to do it my way. Because we're teaching as life-saving classes, but we want to make them fun and relatable. And we want people to laugh and relax so that they can learn and they can retain. It's not just about getting the certification, the card. It's about how do you walk out of here and you're a better provider as a result of taking the class, of being in the room. And that's how it went. And then I said, okay, I'll do it in my 50s. And I tell people, tell God what you'll do. So at 37, my marriage was falling apart. Burnout on hospital culture. I tore my rotator cuff and because I had switched from education to ICU and I tore my rotator cuff moving a patient. And I thought, I'm not ready to leave yet. And there were nudges to leave the organization. Like it was God moments. There was like, it's time. And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not comfortable. It's not time.
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe I will do a clipboard kind of job. And that night, I literally tore 2 tendons in my foot doing Zumba.
Oh, my goodness.
And I called my past ICU director, who had started out as a mentor, became my director, now is my best friend on the whole planet. And she started laughing. And I said, I have the weight of the world on my shoulder. I was like, and I literally cannot stand on my right foot. Literally, that's where I tore the tendons. And she laughed and she said, God's told you twice, but if you haven't heard them yet, you still got an arm and a leg left. Oh. And I literally dropped into my bedroom floor. I'll never forget that moment. And I just wept. And I was like, okay. I was like, I give up. I give in.
Right.
So there had been a lot of prayer. I've been given advice, always pray for peace or no peace. And so I had spent 3.5 years praying for peace about the marriage, about my career, about all the things, because I've got young children.
Yeah.
Thomas and Lainey were going to finish high school before I started this company. And then in the blink of an eye, I get this moment of peace and clarity. And it's like, it's time. And I actually woke up to a booming voice that said, how do you know whether or not you can fly if you're not willing to wear the wings? And I remember waking up and going,
whoa.
And then I fell asleep. And there was nothing profound in that moment. I didn't get up and sing hallelujah or record anything. I literally journal about it. Yeah. I fell back asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, I called my best friend immediately. And I was like, this was this moment. And I was like, and it's about my ex-husband and our marriage. And she literally said, you codependent ass, go back to Al-Anon and tell everybody God himself gave you a message and you've yet given it to someone else. But it was in that moment that I realized that it was time.
Yeah.
And I was terrified, but I did have the peace that passed understanding. It was a really weird, it's almost like being on a roller coaster and you're like, you're excited and you're terrified and all the things.
Right.
Thomas was 6 and Lainey was 4.
Wow.
So I quit my job, left my husband, started a company. And that's how medicaltraining.me started. And it was if you'll build it, they'll come moment.
Yeah.
It really was a whole field of dreams. And then I met you because then I met your counselors in the office because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I built it, but they're not coming yet. And then there was this panic. And I think another thing for entrepreneurs is don't expect it to happen overnight.
No.
It just doesn't. It doesn't. It takes time. And you have to have the patience and the finances or some side hustle or whatever to sustain you through that, because it took a good 8 or 9 months before really things started clicking and I started breaking even. And that was terrifying. And really, I was only breaking even then because my rent was being offset by my parents who invested in the building. That was a God moment itself, how I ended up in that building.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You've said so many things in the past 3 minutes,
sorry.
but it's awesome. And I would love to just highlight a few things. So one thing you mentioned was starting this company when you had 2 small children.
Oh,
Do you know how many women I know who are moms that have started companies when their kids were young? I just want to take a moment and applaud these ladies. You're one of them. I know I could, dozens. I did the same. There's so many moms that start businesses when their kids are young. I don't know what it is about us, but there's something.
Necessity is a mother of invention.
Okay.
So I think that you start to figure it out, and it is. And then people go, how did you do it? And I tell people, you know how you did it? Because you just get up and you do it. It's not I'm not sure I can do this or not. No, you just get up and you do it. And then later on, you're like, oh my God, how did I do it? But for the grace of God. I tell people God looks after children and idiots. So, and they're like, so and some lady in my class was like a child of God. And I was like, that's right? I was like, let's be honest. So but it's amazing.
You just said it, moms. That is what moms do. Like moms with littles are tired. They're worn out. They're pulled in a million different directions, but they just get up every morning and just do it. And they keep showing up for their kids and themselves and their families because they have to.
Yeah.
And I think when you start a business, if you have like this passion in your heart,
right,
and you launch into it, you just keep showing up because you have to. You have this drive, this purpose.
I refused to let it fail. Like failure was never an option.
Yeah.
And that was the whole thing, was that you have to go in and you just have to resolve yourself. And when it doesn't work, you just take a breath and you figure it out. You pivot. You mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, there are moments in life when you have to pivot, and that's such a thing. Yeah. And I hated the word pivot after the pandemic, right? But that was again one of those moments where pivot became a necessity, and or there's this, I wish I could remember the exact quote, but when I first went into that first education position, I read some like leadership journal or something because I was like, ooh, I'm going to be a leader. And there was this guy who was like the former CEO of Intel. And he said, in everyone's life, there are ready moments. He says, and if you miss the moment to advance to the next level of your performance, it's gone forever. Like basically as it is, you miss that moment, you don't get there. And so that's what I'm really ascribing my life to, is when the ready moment comes up and it's screamingly obvious. I do a lot of prayer. I'm like, God, is this my ego or is this really my next ready moment? Right. And then when it becomes screamingly obvious, I'm like, you got to jump on it or you're going to miss it. It says, if you miss that moment, you start to decline. And I'm like, that's exactly it. And I look at people sometimes who've missed the ready moment and I'm so sad for them. Yeah. And maybe that moment will occur again, but I'm like, if you had just, and that's how Launch Joko started. You know, the entrepreneurship program in the county is because we wanted people to really be able to grab onto that and watch them succeed when most entrepreneurs fail within 5 years. So that's the big critical moment. Yeah. Yeah. You have to just keep going. Yeah. How do you, so 2 things. You mentioned earlier, imposter syndrome. Like how do you manage or combat imposter syndrome? Because I think that's what keeps a lot of people stuck. Yeah. Especially in business. You know how we talked about smarter people have smarter people in the room, the smartest people? I think that's the key to imposter syndrome, because you would think as you get more successful, the voice would die down. That bitch gets so loud. Like she is just like in your ear. And I did laugh because my best friend, she's such an amazing, dynamic woman. And she said that she named hers Helga. She said that like voice? Her imposter that gets really loud and is, who do you think you are? And she was like, I named her Helga because she's hateful and she's mean and she's gruff. And someone gave her some doll from somewhere. I don't remember the whole story, but like she looked at her, she's, oh my God, this is what Helga would look like. And she was like, so she's looking at this doll and she's like, oh my God. You know what she did? She said, Melissa, I had a ceremony in my backyard and I burned the bitch. She said, I created a fire and I said, I am no longer letting you rule my thoughts or what's going on. And she literally had a physical ceremony where she burnt that doll and said that since then she felt empowered, that when that voice starts to speak up, she's, you're dead to me. Right. Like you're dead to me. And I think that with imposter syndrome, surrounding yourself with a tribe that keeps you humble as you get more successful so you don't get too big for your britches,
Yeah.
right? That's a JoCo term. But also to encourage you and to remind you that this is what you were born to do and this is what you're stepping into. And that if you are about to make a huge misstep, that they'll also call you out on that too and say, that wasn't for you.
Yeah.
This isn't for you. I know this is what you want, but this isn't for you.
Yeah.
That's how I deal with imposter syndrome. It's not just a me thing. Prayer, tremendously.
Yeah.
If this is for me, make it for me. If not, eliminate it out of my life.
So I had a friend who, she prays this all the time. Bless it or block it, God.
Oh,
If it's
like
for me,
that.
bless
Yeah.
it. If it's not, please block
block it.
And so I've adopted that prayer as well. Bless her, block it.
Yeah. I've had a couple of relationships recently that I was like, if they are not for me, and I was like, they're gone. And I'm like, part of me wanted to be like, hey, are you okay? And I was like, prayed for that. I prayed for that.
Yeah.
Even the person I talked about in the speech, and everybody's, oh, how's that going? I was like the next day, he was like a hidden narcissist and tried to gaslight me. And I was like, no, we're not doing that.
No, been there, done that, not doing that.
But now I'm on video recorded talking about this wonderful man.
I did that part out. No, I was just kidding.
Mom's, am I going to get to meet him? I was like, no, he turned out to not to be a very nice person.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
That you also made a good point though, like surrounding yourself with strong relationships, connecting to other people who can help you in those imposter moments or those moments where you're afraid.
Because they have them too. And that's the thing. I have just the most incredible group. Like growing up, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends. Girls can be so mean, right? And they can just they cut so deep and it hurts so badly. And I had 3 brothers. So I hung around with more guys than girls.
Yeah.
And since I've come here and started, I would say in the last 5 years, I have met like my ride or die best friends. Like I've got my one best friend, she's in the mountains. So her being displaced and different. Now I was lost and I met this group of women and they're all successful in their own right. And what I know, the reason I know they're my tribe, we don't sit around and talk about other people.
Right.
We sit around and talk about life and we sit around and encourage each other. And it's not like a kumbaya Oprah on the couch moment every time, but it's a real relationship and we're walking through life together and we want nothing but success for each other.
Right.
It's never I compare myself to them or they're comparing themselves to me. And that's when I know it's like the real deal. And I am so grateful that I can see that and I can recognize that because I wonder how many people take relationships like that for granted. And I'm telling you, I would not trade that group of women for the world. And they do. They help me regulate and keep honest and stay humble and not completely fly off the rails because I'm a free spirit. So they're the ones that are like, okay, you're starting. One of my friends one time said, you're the balloon filled with helium, but sometimes you need a good friend to be your string. And so they're my string. They're my string. And sometimes I'm their helium.
Yeah.
So it works.
Yeah.
But
what would you say to somebody who is you 5 or 10 years ago that didn't have that tribe? Like, how do you find those people?
That's the crazy thing is there's no way to fabricate it. It just has to happen. And I think that was really hard. A big life lesson for me was the fact that when I came to start my company, instead of doing it in a town where people knew me and I had a reputation, I literally packed up and moved, right? And I grew up in Johnston County, but I had moved away as a teenager and I had not maintained relationships. So starting all over again, it was frustrating for me because I felt like people should instantly know me, like me, trust me, respect me. And it's about the relationship building. So it took a little time to build those meaningful, authentic relationships. And it's not something that you can rush. And I think there were times when I'm like, what can I do to get in faster? You can't. And so I would tell me 5 or 6 years ago, breathe and trust the process. And there are times in your life where you need to stand alone for a minute to realize you can, and to believe in yourself and determine what your values are without other people's influences. And then people like you will gravitate towards you.
Totally.
And because there's no way I could have, there's no magic sauce.
Yeah.
It's time and it's God. And it's, I think, being authentic to who you are instead of trying to look like and be like everyone else. Be comfortable enough to be different.
Totally.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I love that about my children is the one thing I can say about them is they really march to their own beat sometimes. And where it would have been so much easier for them to conform to what other people were doing so they could fit in faster, that's just not been part of who they are. And it's made it harder sometimes for them, but I think it's going to make them stronger in the end.
You modeled that for them, obviously.
Right.
It's just
not intentionally.
You did. And I think you said the key phrase, authenticity.
Yeah.
And people talk about being yourself, being true to yourself, all this stuff. But authenticity is what you just said, like knowing who you are, knowing your values, not shying away from that.
Right.
And just being who I believe God created each of us to be, and being bold and courageous in that and not backing down. And you literally attract people to you that are supposed to be with you when you are bold and authentic.
I think, because then you're all living the same truth on some level. That doesn't mean that all my friends are just like me, because we would all, God, we would be such a hot mess.
Robots then, right?
Well, we'd be robots and we'd be hot messes. There'd be nobody to bail us out of jail, none of the things. But if you can't be an authentic in who you are and you can't find comfort in who you are, then you're never going to have peace because you really do just have to sit in that pocket. And the challenge is, I was explaining this to my sister-in-law this weekend. She's getting ready to turn 40.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, it's about to get good.
Oh,
and she said, what do you mean? I was like, it is not until you're about 40 years old as a woman that all of a sudden you become comfortable in your own skin in a way that you can't describe to other people. And I don't think you can rush the process.
Right.
But it's like finally this moment, you're like, you know what? This is who I'm going to be. I'm not going to always, for me, I'm not always going to completely have it together. Like I have these moments where like, she's so put together and I'm like, give me 5 minutes. Like something's going to happen. I'm that friend that like embarrasses themselves. We have these moments. I call one of my friends and I'm like, I'm Melissa it. She, oh boy, she's let me sit down. She's what have you done now? And I'm like, and we talk about these Melissa moments, but I don't think until you turn about 40 and I hate that because it frustrates me. But I tell people, if I knew what I knew now and I had the confidence in my 20s that I had now, I would have been off the rails.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, oh yeah. The
universe could have stopped you.
It would have been bad. So it's probably a blessing that we come into that.
But I think that's good though, because if we were this comfortable and confident in our 20s, there are so many things you learn through mistakes and bumps and errors in 20s and 30s that I don't know that you'd be educated enough, life educated enough to handle it
or
40s,
anything
50s.
else.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right.
We have to appreciate each season.
We really do. And that's the whole thing. And don't rush the season. If you're not in your 40s yet, enjoy it, right? Because there are so many things that are going to change about you.
Yeah.
But embrace where you are. I've got friends that are in their 50s and 60s. And gosh, one of my favorite people in the world, she's in her late 70s now, and she's amazing. And actually, when I met her, she was in her 40s. And she was so bold and unapologetic that her name is Sada. And I remember like we were in a Ruby Tuesday. So this is one of those pivotal moments. And who are you becoming? Are you comfortable in yourself? We're in a Ruby Tuesday and Midnight Hour by Wilson Pickett came on. And she was like, oh my God, this is my jam. And I'm like, this is a great song. And she's like, no, you don't understand. She's like, wait a minute. And she stood up in the aisle of the Ruby Tuesday in Wilson, North Carolina and was dancing. And I was like, I'm like, oh my God. And she's like, don't worry about the world, honey. This is a moment. And she's dancing. And then she sat down and she goes, nope, it's too good. And she got up and did it again. And like, I really look at who I am now. And I have mirrored that in there because I appreciated the authenticity. And I appreciated the moment that she just grabbed life and just sucked it in. And it's like one of my favorite memories of us because it was so early on. And it was having again a tribe that poured into you and understanding the confidence she has now and watching her as she's gracefully aged and the things she's experienced. And she's just such a beautiful person.
That's cool.
I love her so much.
That is cool.
Yeah.
So pivot here in a minute or for a minute. I know that you've really gotten heavy into speaking.
Yes.
First of all, I believe you're a Maxwell trained speaker.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So I'm a certified John Maxwell trainer, speaker, and coach. That's what
Okay.
they tell us to say. I wanted to pour into myself, and I didn't have time to go back and get a master's. If I'm completely honest, there was nothing strategic about it.
Right.
I wanted to know how I could be a better leader and how I could influence other people, meaning the contractors that work with medicaltraining.me. And Pam Tripp from Commonweal Health is a John Maxwell trainer, speaker, and coach. And they were hosting the Live to Leads.
Okay.
That is something I would recommend. You can do that online. And that's once a year, they do this Live to Lead like webinar for a day. And it is my fuel as a leader. And I said, you know what? I want to go. What do you have to do to be certified? Paid a lot of money, went to Orlando, had one heck of a time, got to meet John Maxwell.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite moment, I was like, oh my God, I think I'm one of your people. Like we're getting like one of those obligatory shots where you pay a lot of money to go stand next to. And he goes, people like you make me nervous when you say things like that. I said, as they should, but I really think we are. And he was like, probably. I was like, yes. He's this wise man, like a smart ass mentality and a strong faith in God. And it's just like the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
So I went and got that certification and had no idea I would use it like this later. So what that certification did is it gave me credibility in a world that said, okay, we know Melissa, but they're like, oh, but Melissa's now a certified speaker. So it did lend a different level of credibility that makes me chuckle because I still create my own content. When you get certified, he has books and he has whole like lunch and learns and keynotes and all these things tied to about 5 or 6 of the books come with that initial level of certification. But I never wanted to do it that way. Again, it goes back to authenticity.
Yeah.
I absolutely love his teachings. I use a lot of his information and I always give credit to whoever I'm teaching, but I like grabbing from all the thought leaders.
Right.
But that's how the speaking. So pandemic, pivot being the word.
Yeah.
None of us saw that coming, right? Show us the handbook on how to survive a pandemic. Now there's one, I'm sure. I can write one. You can write one. But I had just spoken on a panel in February of 2020. Johnston Community College had a panel discussion on the recruitment and retention of workforce in Johnston County. And somehow I got asked to be on the panel, which we still laugh about today, Scott Sides. I called Scott. It was Accentuate Staffing was a major sponsor and he was on the panel. And I'm like, dude, what if I got to say, you're funny. And you can talk about anything, but I'm not sure what you're supposed to do up there. So I sat up there and I listened to all these different people speaking and I'm medicaltraining.me. I'm a small business. I don't have a recruitment retention issue. And I'm listening and it hit me. And I said, here's the thing. You can talk about all these strategies in the workforce, but the problem is today that people would rather quit their jobs than resolve conflict in the workforce. So part of what I do as a John Maxwell speaker, trainer, and coach is I work with teams to understand and appreciate differences and talk about communication and conflict resolution and talk about burnout and resilience and how they all tie together in this moment. And that was pretty much the only thing I said on the whole panel. Cause like they're talking about recidivism and with prisoners. And I'm like, I'm not talking. And as a result of that, the pandemic happened, shut down and the business closed. And then all of a sudden I tell people, literally there's a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. You got to read it. It's John Mark Comer, Comer. It is a book on busyness, sickness, and he's actually a Catholic priest that burnt out. It is magic. And so the irony is God always laughing at me. I'm literally facilitating a book study with a group of women from church on the ruthless elimination of hurry when I don't have time to read the damn book sometimes. And I swear, and I'm like, why am I the one reading? And I'm like, okay, in this moment, being authentic, like, talking about these conversations and how to slow down and how to hurry. Well, when the pandemic happened, I was panicked. I was like, how am I as a single mom going to provide for my 2 kids? How am I going to lose it all? And I'm looking at my savings and I literally had 3 months worth of money to float my company and the kids and I. Now I'm a nurse. So I can always go back to the bedside. And that was my first like knee jerk. And my mom was like, you're insane. You're a single mother with 2 kids. Why would you don't know what this is? Statistically, looking at your body shape and everything else, you're the person that ends up on the ventilator and dies, Melissa. So are you really going to do this? And so I was like, what am I going to do? Then people were reaching out. They were like, Melissa, our teams are freaking out. They're not resilient. Can you talk to us? So I'm getting on Zooms and all of a sudden I'm facilitating. And then KS Bank came to me and said, we heard you speak on that panel and we want to talk about culture because it's very important to us. And we don't want a flash in the pan experience is what he said to me. So what can you do? And that is where everything pivoted again. And it was this God moment because I can't say I was strategic in it because once again, I said, yeah, I'll do this keynote speaking and this coaching and counseling, but it will be when my kids are out of high school, which is what I said about medical training.
Right.
Me. Thomas will be a senior this year and Lainey will be a sophomore. And here we are. But this time I recognize the ready moment.
That was just
right. I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
And so I am blessed that they embrace my work ethic and I have to fiercely fight for time with them. Because what I worry about at the end of the day is I don't want to give everybody else my best.
Yeah.
And my family get what's left over.
Totally.
So that has been a real challenge. But at the same time, Thomas is like, I want to be an entrepreneur. And I was like, great, but you have to have a trade first.
Yeah.
So you got to figure it out. Lainey, she was anti-medicine, everything. And now all of a sudden she's, you know what? I'm thinking about med school.
That's
and I'm
cool.
like, you're 15.
Yeah.
You got plenty of time to figure it out.
Yeah. Those ready moments, though, we don't feel ready.
Oh, never.
But I believe as a person of faith that God's already gone before you and you might not feel ready, but he is ready.
And that's where the prayer comes in. If God, if this is for me, what would you say? Bless it or block it.
Right.
Bless it or block it. And it seems like in every single one of these moments, you can't manufacture.
Yeah.
It's happened. And just in the last 6 months, I've been doing some speaking and stuff since the pandemic.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden it's boom. And we had a speaker last year. She's an international speaker, Sonia Aranza. She's the one that talked about diversity.
Yeah.
And she is just one of my rock star, sheroes. I just think so much of her. And she sat me down actually in 2017 or 18, I had her come to Smithfield for a women's conference there. And she said, this is your future. And when you're ready to do this, I want to pour into you and I want to mentor you. And I was like, thank you. And she's like, this is. And when you finally figure that out, call me. So then we had her come to Clayton and do the women's conference because she's just got such a powerful message. And she speaks to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Boeing and McDonald's and all these Congress. It's like amazing, her speakers panels, Society of Human Resource Management, national level. And for her to see that in me, because somebody else, Heidi Stieber, had already seen that in me and said, this is your future. And I was like, oh, thank you. You're my friend. You know? And she's like, no, this is your future. So then Sonia saying it, and Sonia coming back last year, and I facilitated the panel discussion, and she saw it and she said, this is your future. Let me know when you're ready. So I finally, after Elevate Her, Heidi videoed it for me. So it wasn't a professional level video, but there is a video of me doing that talk. And I sent it to her and she said, it's time. And so I'm getting ready to start working with her because she wants to pour into me. And I want to do this for the love of you, for the love of what you do in your community. She's like, I really look forward to working with you.
That's awesome.
So again,
she's big time.
Oh, she is. She's huge. And she's so humble. You wouldn't know it. I didn't do my research on her the first time for the first conference. So I Melissa'd it. I picked her up in the Honda Pilot with the paint scraped off the back. And I got her a hotel room in Johnston County off I-95. This international speaker, and gave her this gift basket that it looked sad, but I was so proud. I didn't have any money, but I was doing these things, and I had heard her speak at a conference, and she just really moved me. And she never said a word. I picked her up, and she's like, I want to hear about you. So we're sitting. I said, can I take you to dinner that night? Which was a spontaneous moment. So I took her to Simple Twist in downtown Smithfield, which is a great restaurant, right? Great food. But I picked her up, and she's, I have a gift for you, but I wanted to get to know you better because I wanted to write in it. And I was like, okay. And she said, I co-wrote this book. I was like, you wrote a book and you're going to give it to me? And she was like, I'm not done yet. And I was like, okay. And I was like, oh my God. She says, I co-wrote this book, but it's not in publishing anymore because one of the authors that wrote with me, when he died, it was in his estate that if his face was on the book, it couldn't be republished. If his likeness wasn't on it, then those books could continue forward. And I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. She's like, I'm not finished yet. She was like, and it is a book called The Blueprint to Success. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, Melissa, stop. And I'm like, okay. I co-wrote this book with Ken Blanchard, which is Chick-fil-A.
Whoa.
and Stephen Covey. I said, shut the front door. And she says, I will. And everybody in the restaurant like looks at us. And I'm like, oh my God. And it like hits me. You just picked her up in a 2014 Honda Pilot with the bumper scraped off from when your ex-husband hit it when you first bought it and you never got it fixed. And rolled her up into Joco to a hotel off of I-95 to speak at this conference. And this woman is an international speaker that wrote the book with these guys.
Yeah.
So, of course she knew. And I was like, oh, it was such a humbling moment. And I was like, man, we really missed the opportunity to promote this more. You know? The owner of Chick-fil-A was like, you had who where? And I was like, yeah, and you didn't send anybody. Did you? I said, look, y'all should know that when I do something, I'm not going to half-ass it. So you just need to show up. If I tell you, trust me, how many times have I called you and said, Sarah, if you'll just trust me, I know it sounds crazy, but if you will get on this ride with me, I promise you.
Yeah.
And you have to know me because up until the last minute, you may be like, what am I getting into?
Yeah.
And then you get there and you're like, oh,
okay.
yeah. All right. I trusted her. And that always makes me nervous too. But when I put my name on it,
Yeah.
I'm always, it doesn't have the option to fail at that point because that's my ego. We can call it humility, but that's my ego.
Or
I'm
your
if I put
passion.
my name on it,
Yeah.
we can call it passion. That sounds better.
So you are really leaning into this ready moment. You're ready.
Yeah.
And you're leaning into these speaking engagements and just going
And I'm
for it.
terrified, but I'm ready. And I'm trusting that I don't have to have all the answers again. That's the crazy of it is I'm like, okay. And the what if I fail? What if I don't?
Yeah.
If I don't?
What's that phrase? What if you fly?
Yeah. Okay. So you remember, how do you know if you can fly if you're not willing to wear the wings? For this moment, I'll never forget that booming voice that you can call me crazy or not, but I really feel like it was the voice of God. And I heard it and it was a voice I'd never heard before. And I've only heard it one other time since then. And that is a crazy story. And I'm like, maybe it was gas. I don't know. But what if it wasn't? Right. So I've got this big deal that I've written. It's probably the biggest thing in my career. And it's a ready moment and it's a really big number and it's a really big commitment. And like all of a sudden, like nothing was happening and it was coming into play. And my office manager, who doesn't know all my story, she looked at me in that moment when I got off the phone where they said, write the proposal. And she said, put on your wings, honey. It's time to fly. And I'll cry right now thinking about it because I thought, oh. And I wrote it on a Post-it note and put the date on it because I was like, that can't be. I just hit the microphone.
Okay.
It cannot be a coincidence.
No.
That same terminology came and I was like, and that was one of those moments of God. I tell people, God, you need to scream and yell at me to make it abundantly clear that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And that was the moment where my fear all of a sudden went to the peace that passes understanding. Whatever is next for me is next for me and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, it's not going to be okay. It's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be wonderful. And I look at what it can do for my kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like starting a business as a single mom, like I didn't walk away with money and they have really grown up missing out on some moments. And they say, but you're teaching a work ethic. Damn, I am. Because we have worked for everything. But I just look at how could this change their lives as well and how can it impact them and how that poor Lainey is competing in Seattle next month. She won the state competition for FCCLA for public speaking.
Really?
She did stroke education. She said, Mom, I've heard you talk about it for years and it's really important. And so she's competing in Seattle. And I'm like, okay, she's getting some of the medicine bug.
Yeah.
She's definitely got the whole public speaking. She is me, but without any childhood trauma that could cause her to second guess herself or slow down. And that is so exciting and terrifying.
Right.
I'm like, there is nothing holding her back like it did me. But I also know that's going to make her future brighter. And Thomas sitting back with his natural leadership abilities as well. My son, he's your classic jock and he loves that. But he listens to David Goggins every morning.
Oh,
can you imagine? That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot. But you know what? He's doing it. And he is the definition of resilience. And I can't wait to see what he does with that either because he's amazing.
Yeah. I think you've modeled resilience for your kids. And so they're just watching you. And
you didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just do it.
Thank you so much for sharing so much of your story, your business venture and your path and all this good wisdom here. If you could leave the audience with one final thought, maybe about business or about flying or ready moments,
I would say I never try to push my beliefs on people, but if you are a believer in higher power, higher energy, whatever it is for you, settle into that. Because if you can listen to that wisdom, I have a keynote talk that I've done a few times that I talk about the fact that we'll grab a map and we'll map everything out. And the problem with the map is the fact that the map becomes outdated. And all of a sudden there are roads that are shut down. There are new roads that have been built. I really tell people, go back and focus on your compass. And for me, my compass is my higher power and it's my tribe. It's my mother and my tribe of women. When you're trying to make these major decisions, pray for peace or no peace, and then go talk to your tribe. That's your compass, and you will always end up exactly where you're supposed to be if you'll live in that pocket.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. It's great wisdom. All right. You want to share the website for Medical Me?
Okay. So medicaltraining.me. So www.medicaltraining.me. And if you want to know about the leadership portion of it, it's medicaltraining.me/illuminated-training. So it's all there.
Yep.
I'm still working on the speaker page. I'm building the plane while I fly it again. So we're working on building and expanding that. You can follow me, Melissa Godwin Overton, on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where we're trying to put these thought processes in.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Gosh.
Appreciate it.
And we have so much more to do in the future. I'm excited.
That's exciting.
It's just getting started.
That's so cool. If you like what you're listening to, if you like what you've heard today, hey, give us a follow, subscribe, continue to find all this great content. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, that's where our podcasts are found. And hey, I have had Melissa speak at my company for a few things, and she is a dynamic speaker. And so if you're looking for someone to talk to your group, to your company, I promise you, you will not regret it if you call Melissa and get her to come over. So thanks for listening. Hi, everyone. I appreciate you taking time to listen. These days we live in feel stressful, challenging, and maybe even chaotic. I'm really passionate about putting out positive content that will encourage and inspire others. I ask that you follow, subscribe, and even give us a 5-star review. Most of all, share this with your friends and family so together we can help people turn their lives around.